SillyBandz founder Robert Croak recently gave a brutal critique of IUL on his TikTok channel. Let's take a look at the video and see if there's any merit to what he had to say.
IULs are a terrible investment. There, I said it. Now let me explain and the 3 reasons why. Number 1, they have the highest commission rates of any investment vehicle. Some companies charge commission fees ranging from 75 to 160%.
Okay, do IULs have high commission rates? Well, if you compare the upfront commission an advisor might make on an IUL versus the cumulative fees he could charge you on the same amount of money at 1% of your balance per year over the arc of a 30-year retirement, it isn't even really close. The 1% fee would generate the advisor 5 to 6 times more revenue over time. There's really no comparison. What Robert Croak seems to be objecting to is that in some cases, the IUL's commission can be paid up front instead of being spread out over multiple years. Secondly, he mentioned a 75 to 160% commission rate. But the question becomes 75 to 160% of what? Well, of the first year commissionable premium. And that commissionable premium drops through the floor when these products are structured in the right way. And that can only be done when you buy as little insurance as the IRS requires of you and you stuff as much money into it as the IRS allows. So he's trying to scandalize you with big, scary commission numbers, but he's really only telling you half the story. Finally, price is only an issue in the absence of value. So the question becomes, can the IUL materially improve your financial plan in any way at all? And the answer is yes. I'll mention 2 ways right now. First, IULs are not a stock market alternative, as Robert Croak seems to believe. Now, I'm not saying there aren't unethical advisors out there who don't position it as such, but plain and simple, the IUL's returns are not in competition with stock market returns. This is a red herring. IULs are bond alternatives. Reach into your portfolio, remove the bonds, replace them with IUL, and you'll increase your return, you'll lower your risk, lower the standard deviation of your entire portfolio, and experience a better outcome over time. Secondly, IULs serve as the ideal volatility buffer in retirement. The idea here is to accumulate between 3 to 5 years of living expenses in your IUL by day 1 of retirement. Then in the year after a down year in your stock market portfolio, pay for your living expenses out of your IUL. That will give your stock portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. This act alone will allow you to increase your sustainable withdrawal rate on your stock portfolio from 4% to as high as 8%. Let's keep listening.
And those aren't the only fees. There are still administrative fees, surrender charges, and the cost of the insurance, all eating away at your money.
Mischaracterizing the IUL's fees as the common refuge of the ill-informed neophyte IUL critic. All the biggest critics like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, and the White Coat Investor make this rookie mistake when decrying the IUL's so-called high fees. Here's the deal with IUL's fees. They're a little higher in the early years, but they're much lower in the later years. But when you average them out over the life of the program, they can cost you as little as 1/3 of 1%. That's about as competitive as the index funds he'll advocate for later in this video. As for the surrender charges, you have to remember that starting an IUL is like getting married. It only really works if you keep it until death do you part. So for most people, the IUL is a 30 to 60 year proposition. And you should only really start an IUL if you do plan on keeping it for the rest of your life. And if that's the case, who cares if you have surrender charges in the first 10 to 15 years? They're most severe in the first 5 years and drop rapidly soon thereafter. Furthermore, if you were really all that worried about surrender charges, he'd come down equally hard on 401ks and IRAs, each of which have severe penalties if accessed prior to 59.5. Let's keep going.
Number 2, since IULs are not regulated by the SEC, the agents selling them have little to no guidelines they have to follow. And trust me, they will never tell you that if you stop making payments, you could lose all the funds you have contributed. Yes, you would think your money would be safe, but in many cases it is not.
All right, all this comes off sounding a bit like fear-mongering. There are a whole gamut of financial tools that don't fall under the auspices of the SEC. But that doesn't make them inherently bad. It just means they're not a security. With the IUL, for example, your cash value doesn't rise and fall with the stock market. Returns are more conservative, but they're much more predictable. Like bonds, but safer and more productive. No big deal. Next, When structured properly, there is no requirement to make payments into these programs indefinitely. In fact, for most of my clients, we completely fund their policies in as few as 6 or 7 years. Again, it just feels like Robert Croak isn't all that acquainted with the inner workings of the IUL. These are tired critiques that come across as shallow and misinformed.
And number 3, terrible performance, and the agent makes more than you do with your money, especially in the first 10 years. They may promise 8 to 12% returns, but that does not take into effect all of the fees described above.
Okay, he says that IULs have terrible performance. Well, terrible performance compared to what? If you're comparing it against what the stock market has done over time, sure, but like I said, this isn't a stock market alternative. It's a bond alternative. And it isn't unrealistic to expect between 5 and 7% net of fees over time. And if you can get 5 to 7% net of fees without taking any more stock market risk than what you're accustomed to taking in your savings account, well, that's a pretty safe and productive way to grow at least a portion of your portfolio. And then it keeps harping on the front-end loaded nature of the policy. Yes, the fees are higher in the early years, but they fall off the cliff typically after year 10. So don't do an IUL if you have a 10-year investment horizon. If you're planning on keeping it your entire life, which is the only sensible way to utilize an IUL, then it shouldn't matter what's happening in the first 10 or even 15 years of the program. We should be much more concerned with what the fees are on average per year over the life of the policy. And when you approach it this way, you'll find the IUL is much less expensive than the average 401k plan, which incidentally, I don't see him criticizing.
So before you get sucked in on an IUL, read up, ask a lot of questions, and consider this. Would you be better off opening a Roth IRA and investing in a basket of index funds and avoiding all the fees and uncertainties? Okay, so we have the plan. Let's go.
Here he creates a false dichotomy. He thinks the choice is between the Roth IRA and the IUL, but he seems completely oblivious to the synergy that can be had when you implement both alternatives at the same time. According to a recent Ernst & Young study, if you earmark 30% of your retirement savings towards cash value life insurance, you can dramatically increase your sustainable withdrawal rate on your other stock market investments. That's the volatility buffer concept I explained earlier. So it's not one or the other, it's both. But this type of nuance is completely lost in the likes of Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, the white coat investor, and apparently now Robert Croak. Folks, in the next 10 years, I'm looking to put 1 million Americans on the road to the 0% tax bracket. If you would like some help implementing a balanced, comprehensive approach to tax-free retirement that shields you from the impact of higher taxes down the road, head on over to davemcknight.com and click on the Connect with an Advisor button. I'm happy to refer you to an advisor in the Powers Zero Network that's been trained, vetted, and qualified personally by me. If you're a financial professional and want to learn how to become a certified Powers Zero advisor, head over to powerzero.com and opt into my free video series. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them into the comment section below. I'll respond to every single one of them personally. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a video. This is David McKnight. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.